So yeah, so what are we up to?
Well, not sure how to start this one.
Well, our idea initially was that we were going to do a Christmas episode, all to do with the various spooky sorts of things, and just
Festive Grimness.
Yes, Festive Grimness.
Festive Grimness, of which there's quite a lot, and
there is quite a lot. Going right back to the beginning, there's quite a lot of grim from the off.
Well, how about this? All right. Well, the season is upon us. The season of the birth of our Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And also the season of lots of spooky ghosts for
Yeah.
some reason. There is an
this is it.
association. There is an association between Christmas and spookiness, although I don't know if that might be an English thing, That might be a British tradition, the kind of Christmas ghost story. I'm not sure if it's as prevalent out here in the States.
Well, I suppose in Britain, and well, actually in this case, all over in this example, I guess most people trace it back to A Christmas Carol, to Dickens. And some people would say, well, that's where the tradition comes from, but then Dickens and other things has made reference to that being the case when he was a child, that a ghost story would be told.
Yeah, he was pulling from something or other.
Yeah, so it may that may be what I guess popularized it. Maybe. Well, actually, that doesn't. I guess he kind of put it in print, and and everything that led out from that. But I think it was in existence beforehand.
Well, yeah, I mean it's a pagan holiday to begin with, right?
Yeah,
I mean it was sort of co-opted from the pagan Saturnalia is that what they were calling it?
The winter solstice.
Winter solstice. Yeah, and the pagans, they were always creepy.
They're always
and they continue to be. Yeah, they continue to be. From everything I've learned about pagans, which is exclusively from horror movies, they all live on islands and get naked and shag a lot, and then sacrifice someone usually. Yeah.
Oh Jesus Christ! Oh Jesus Christ!
Yeah, they're obsessed with willies and bums and and
I was
murder.
thinking about that actually, because I was thinking of the kind of spooky stuff that you would maybe feel compelled to turn to at this time of year. I guess maybe because of the tradition of the BBC Christmas ghost stories, which tend to be about.
We'll be getting onto those.
We will get onto those.
Yeah.
But just they tend to be about something from a long time ago appearing in the present.
That's right.
So, and I guess, so in that way, the kind of folk horror stuff feels like appropriate to this time of year.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah,
it's something from antiquity coming to remind us. I mean, often, if there is a theme to a lot of the Christmas horrors, it tends to be a lot about punishment.
Yes.
There seems to be a bit of a theme of, even with A Christmas Carol, it's Ebenezer Scrooge sort of, I suppose, not being punished exactly, but being made aware of his transgressions and his poor attitude.
And warned about what will happen.
Yeah. That's right, yeah. And I don't know, I guess the ghost of Christmas Present in A Christmas Carol is pretty paganish. He's got a lot of vines and holly around him or something.
Yes.
And
is he what one? Oh no, I was thinking of what one had the two, but that's the two children but that's the last one. That's isn't that Christmas Future?
Now you
And they've
see
got names. It's like famine and
famine and yeah, I think that's actually in present. I think the Ghost of Christmas Present shows them these two children
with the two. Yeah,
yeah, which isn't in the Muppet Christmas Carol, so therefore it's basically not canonical as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
If it's not
You're
in the
right,
Muppets
though.
Christmas Carol,
He does have that pagan sort of like almost like the Green Man. The
yeah, and I think that's I think that's well acknowledged, or I might just be making it up entirely. But that again, in the Muppets Christmas Carol, it looks a bit pagan to me.
Yeah, so, and also in the one with George C. Scott, which is the one I saw almost as a youngster. If I remember, he's got like the holly crown I'm pretty sure that's there.
Yeah, I reread the book last year, and I think it's mentioned that that he looks a bit Wicker Man-y.
Yeah, even though, but then I was thinking, well, does the Wicker Man feel like I haven't checked yet if it does, but I mean, the guy's called Summer Isle, so so maybe
the
not.
Wicker Man's all about spring, isn't it?
Yeah.
No Christmas in that. Although
no,
is he singing Christmas hymns in the church? No, he's not. At the beginning, no, he's just singing his Sunday hymns.
Yes, and I've only seen that opening maybe once when I first got the DVD back in the day, which had the director's cut
the
on.
extended version. Yeah,
I only watched that once, I think.
Oh, really? You prefer the other one?
I think so. In some ways, I do. I like that he just kind of. He's just there. He's just appearing on the island, and that's it.
Yeah.
But saying that, I have never seen the so-called final cut, but I do have it. So that might be a thing to do to look at soon.
I don't remember which one's which, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them all. I know, especially streaming services really kind of confuses this now because you flip something on and you're not ever quite sure which version you're getting.
Yeah.
So then. Yeah, then it kind of confuses. I just learned recently, living out in the US, that their version of Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, and this is a tangent, because there's no Christmas in that, is notably shorter than our one.
Oh, really?
Significantly. Entire cameos, like Christian Slater's cameo is completely gone, with him being brainwashed. Yeah. All of the running gag about henchmen's families... with the henchmen die and then you see their families being told.
That's one of the best bits.
Gone. Completely gone. That whole subplot is gone. Yeah. It's a shame. And
bizarre.
Also, the US have, as we all know, they've waged a war on Christmas. So there is no Christmas here. It's gone. It's been shortened. It's been excised.
It's been whipped away by by it's because at this time of the year you always around these parts you tend to hear a lot about how Christmas is gone from us because it will offend somebody. But all you hear you turn on the radio and you're either hearing a Christmas song explicitly about Christmas, or you're hearing someone saying how you never hear Christmas stuff talked about anymore. And that's it.
Yeah. That pretty much sums up the season. Another thing that sums up the season in the UK especially, which has spread, because I'm seeing it being kind of shared around on US websites too, is the UK is guaranteed, without fail, every year to have at least one kind of pop-up Winter Wonderland attraction that is so shit that it's forced to close within days of opening, with a bunch of indignant family, parents complaining about the quality of reindeers that look emaciated. I think one of them promised reindeers and it just had dogs with reindeer antlers on in a kind of little paddock. Yeah. And a very skinny Santa Claus with a horrible fake beard. You get it every single year. There was one last year I was pleased to see. I'm glad that we're keeping that tradition up. Yeah. Charging far too much for something that's really crap.
A tenner to walk into a bunker that has a sort of rooster with a sort of Rudolph nose sellotape to the side of it.
Yeah. Oh no, it's fantastic. But anyway, so we do that. in England, and we also do ghost stories. I don't think we really do that out here so much. I don't think it's something that's associated with Christmas here. Even though it's in the song, The Most Wonderful Time of Year. At one point he says, there'll be scary ghost stories and...
Oh, really?
Something else.
I never picked up on that.
Yeah, it's in there. So obviously it was, but now it's gone. And now it's all, mostly quite saccharine... saccharine, feel-good family movies, Lifetime movies. I mean, honestly, the Lifetime Christmas movies belong on the Grimmer Comforts podcast because they are remarkably grim. So does Tyler Perry's Medea's Christmas, which I don't know. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think so.
Ooh. It's quite something.
What are we dealing with?
Well, I've never felt, sometimes you watch something popular something that everyone else likes, and you go, I cannot figure out why they like this, but you sort of know, why. You're just sort of aghast because you're like, oh, the reaction this gives me is not the same as it's given to everyone else. Like The Hangover for me is an example of being sat in a cinema and not understanding at all why everyone's finding it so funny. But A Medea's Family Christmas. I think it's called A Very Medea Christmas or something like that.
Right.
That just made me think, I don't understand this. Like, this may as well have been made by an alien to me. It's completely... It's just wild. It's just wild. But it's got like Larry the Cable Guy is in it. Chad Michael Murray of One Tree Hill is in it too. And it's doing this strange thing where it's trying to it's aimed at the South, I think. I think it's set in Alabama, and obviously bringing someone like Larry the Cable Guy in, it is trying to appeal to a certain demographic. And then obviously Tyler Perry's movies in general appeal to the black community, and again probably the South, or at least the Midwest. I don't think his target audiences are in the coastal cities, but it's fascinatingly bizarre. It involves Tyler Perry as Medea crucifying a school child with Christmas lights to a big cross.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he's got his seasons in a jumble. He's got his holidays wrong.
Well, yeah, because it's really strange. At one point, it's a Christmas movie, but at one point, for whatever convoluted reason, Medea, his titular character, is teaching a class in the schoolhouse, and suddenly in the schoolhouse, there's a big cross there in the classroom, and I'm like, that wasn't there at the beginning, but it's here now, and I'm like, well, that's really weird. Why have they done that? And then, sure enough, it's just so that this scene can happen where he strings up a schoolgirl to this cross and crucifies her. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah. That's actually something I was thinking about. I don't know when it happened, but at some point, the nativity stuff itself started to drift away from Christmas for me.
That's so that war on Christmas for you.
Well, this is the thing.
Can't talk about Jesus, can you?
No, not if you're some sort of pansy fucking, cock-ass woke flake pinko. Yeah. I don't care about room in the inn. I just want to know, is there room in this year's department store Christmas marketing for a few more minority groups or a couple more same-sex Santas? So of course
I hear they're making the turkeys halal now. Slitting their throats and hanging them upside down. It's inhumane. It's much better the way they did, where they used to just boil them in a huge vat of their fellow turkeys' fats.
yeah, and they're all, all the programs are in halal as well, as far as I hear.
They're singing halal Christmas songs now.
And EastEnders is in Brielle.
They've started saying Alleluia instead of Hallelujah. Now it's all about Allah. Anyhow, yeah, the English though, we're good at a ghost story. We like it.
Yes.
I think the US equivalent of Christmas horror is to do, like, there's this new one out now, Violent Night, I think it's called. I don't know if
I only heard of that yesterday, but yeah.
Oh, you can't move for Violent Night out here. It's all over because it's one of those sort of B-movie-esque Christmas horrors where it's like lol Santa's kicking ass or lol Santa's violent, and they've done that before. There was some low budget movies. I think there was one called A Christmas Horror Story. Or
the
like
one
that.
with Krampus versus Santa.
Krampus versus Santa, yeah. And they come out. But now Universal Studios, arguably one of the biggest movie studio in the US, I think, has done one of their own called Violent Night with Santa sort of being violent. But that's the US, the closest the US gets to Christmas horror, I think.
Well, the US has a quite a difficult relationship with that sort of stuff because so one of the big sort of things in the 1980s was Silent Night, Deadly Night, which again, I mean, that was hugely controversial. Advertising was pulled and the film was removed from theaters quite quickly. It was a whole brouhaha because
Christmas slashers we're talking about, right? Like Black Christmas would also count.
Black Christmas, which it's kind of, well, obviously, I mean, Halloween happened in some way because of Black Christmas, but those two managed to do the thing that very few others do, which is they're about a particular season or holiday, and they feel like they're of that. So Halloween feels like Halloween, and Black Christmas feels like Christmas. But they're also both genuinely creepy and unsettling and eerie, in a way that very few other films like that are. But yeah, Black Christmas. I mean, it's a wee while since I've seen it, but
it's a very long time since I've seen it. So I can't talk about it very much, but
no, it does have the whole, if I remember correctly, the guy at the start he climbs into the sorority house, whatever, and he hides in the attic. So it has that sort of, the killer is inside the house. I'm not sure if that predates When a Stranger Calls.
Ooh, good question. Probably not.
Probably not, but it was 74, I think, Black Christmas.
Was it that early?
Yeah.
I thought it was closer to the 80s, but maybe not.
It was 74 or 76, one of the two.
Okay.
I think it was 74. It was Bob Clark of Porky's fame.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. And also he did, what do you call it? Murder by Decree, the Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper number.
That's right. I remember that being quite good.
Yeah, I taught a module on London and film. It's kind of a summer school thing where international students would come for maybe a month to do that course, and that was one of the things that at one year we showed to them was Murder by Decree, and it's wonderful. It ticks all the boxes. That it's got the right kind of the kind of London that people who would maybe think of Sherlock Holmes or Jack the Ripper would think of. It does that really well. That kind of, and I guess so does Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes film, but this does it in a way that feels more. Less CGI, I suppose, is what I'm actually I'm sorry, I'm tailing off, but
it's not about Christmas.
It's not about Christmas, no.
We're joining the tradition of not mentioning Christmas at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard these lads, they're doing a Christmas podcast, but all they're doing is talking about Jack the Ripper and Allah.
Yeah.
The halal days instead of the holidays.
Holidays, yeah.
But you shouldn't say holidays. Anyway, it's Christmas. It's bloody Christmas.
Christmas, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so as far as Christmas horrors go in the US, it tends to lean more towards slashers or otherwise comedy violence at Christmas time. Whereas we like a good ghost story, I think.
We do, and the other difference, I think, my hunch is that in the US, the Christmas horror tends to be set now. It's something that's happening
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
present. Whereas here, in the UK, with the ghost stories for Christmas on the BBC and whatnot, it's always it tends to be period stuff, and the stuff that isn't tends to not go down so well. Which is interesting.
I suppose the Christmas ghost stories. So to give a brief explanation of what those are in the UK, starting in the a ghost story for Christmas technically started in the 70s, I think, but then some of the omnibus ones from before that are retroactively kind of included. So Whistle and I'll Come to You was probably the first, right? And that was technically omnibus, but yeah, an adaptation of an M.R. James story, not set at Christmas time. Nothing to do with Christmas in it, but somehow it feels distinctly Christmassy because it was... Actually, I'm not even sure if that was released at Christmas time, that one. I know the later ones were. Well, anyway, it's retroactively been included. So you have, adaptations mostly of M.R. James stories, like, so Whistle and I'll Come to You is one, Lost Hearts, another.
A Warning to the Curious.
Warning to the Curious. But then also The Signalman, which is another Charles Dickens adaptation. And then there were a few more. Schlacken the Painter, which
that's right,
is Sheridan Le Fanu, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they have a few. And now I think of it, I don't think any of them are set at Christmas time. I don't think so.
No.
But they feel distinctly Christmassy, and usually involve someone stumbling upon something from antiquity or something otherwise spooky and supernatural, and not quite knowing what to do with themselves over it. What do you think of those, by the way? Are you a fan of them?
Broadly, yeah. I mean, there are some that maybe don't work as well, but
a couple of clunkers.
Yeah, but on the whole, I mean, Whistle and I'll Come to You, I think is wonderful.
It's really good.
Yeah,
it's spooky.
It is spooky, and it's one of those things like because that was directed by Jonathan Miller.
That's right.
Who does not have any sort of belief in the supernatural, and so it's one of those things like almost like The Exorcist, where they say, well, it feels like it does because the person who directed it, is coming at it from a sort of agnostic / atheistic sort of perspective, and they don't believe in this stuff. But you watch it and you think like, well, if they did, I don't think this would have turned out much different. No. It's like,
it plays all of those M.R. James. I'm not sure if M.R. James himself was an atheist. I think he might have been. Or actually, no, maybe not. He was actually pretty traditional, I think. So he might have been COV. But he was an academic, so all of his stories tend to involve some kind of academic, rational-minded person stumbling upon something that they can't explain.
Yeah.
And again, it also feels punishing too. It's sort of admonishing them for their arrogance. Usually,
yeah, it's essentially sort of tree of knowledge stuff, isn't it? It's like, you don't. But then again, the tree of knowledge that involved, the knowledge of good and evil. That Eve made the decision to reach for that, whereas in something like Whistle and I'll Come to You, there's not really any decision making. It kicks it up by accident.
Yeah, sort of. So Whistle and I'll Come to You is an old professor who goes to the East Anglian seaside for a little holiday, and he's played really well by Michael Hordern, who gives it this kind of strange bumbling. He barely says any words. He sort of makes noises to himself. Yeah. A bit like Mr. Bean. And he's very antisocial, and so he goes to this bed and breakfast, I suppose, and just sort of, even though these are short films, these are 40 odd minutes, if that, and there are multiple scenes of him having breakfast or being in the dining room and ignoring people, but sort of going, egg. Yes.
Yeah,
to himself.
that's right.
Yeah, but
That
then he
is very
goes for
strange,
these.
actually.
Yeah, but the story is he goes for these strolls, and I think he might be. Is he a professor of archaeology or just interested in it? Perhaps.
He's some sort of. He might be. If I remember right, he's there for some reason. But it's not to, or maybe not. Maybe he is just on holiday. But in any case, when he ends up coming across this ancient flute, and if I'm remembering correctly, the reason why that attracts him is because, as you say, it's somehow connected to the work he does as an academic. So, but yeah, so he finds this thing.
Yeah, so all these lovely bits of him walking down the beach, sort of mumbling to himself, "Oh, sand," and he stumbles upon this whistle, brings it back to his house, and he sort of polishes it off, and I think it says in Latin, I want to say. He translates it to "Who is that? Who is coming?" or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, that's oh god, that's giving me shivers.
Yeah,
that's an eerie old collection of words.
Yeah, who is it? Who is that? Who is coming? Or something like that. And obviously gives it a little whistle noise, and yeah, and then almost immediately he's plagued by dreams of him running down the beach, being chased by by a bit of cloth.
But that tablecloth from Amityville too.
Yeah, I was going to say that, or the plastic bag from American Beauty, which it's really different because I've shown this to a few people. I saw this. I'd heard about it. Obviously, I wasn't born when this was airing, but I'd heard about it on the internet in various places, people talking about how terrifying it was, and I watched it by myself very late at night, not at Christmas time, mind you, and it really, really creeped me out. But since then, I've tried to show it to other people, and they've kind of found it a bit silly because it is a bit of cloth sort of running after him.
But yeah, well, that's the thing. I suppose it's kind of like the Lovecraft thing, like M.R. James. I don't know if we should necessarily spoil it because but there's something that happens.
Good idea. Yeah,
there's something that happens at the end that that M.R. James would have written in a way to suggest that. Well, actually, he does describe it fairly. But the description works in a way that seeing it maybe does not quite work.
I think, yeah, I think it does work though. I think it's just you have to sort of be aware of what you're getting, what you're getting into. You're not going to get something that's going to insidious scare you. It's going to be, it's going to be a bit. Yeah,
it works for me.
Because that ending does look a bit odd, but
I'm just thinking of people who that you might be introducing it to now, and why they might find that a wee bit silly, but I didn't necessarily find it silly. Maybe it felt a bit weird.
Yeah,
but
that's I think what got to me was like, oh yeah, you're not used to seeing that kind of thing in other horror movies, because certainly now they would look at that and go, well yeah, that's a bit daft. But then again, there is that bit in The Conjuring where the bit of laundry flies off and
that's right,
the sheet flies off and hits an invisible figure and turns into a spooky ghost.
Yeah, and there's also
and everyone thought that was terrifying. So fair enough. Maybe there is something to this whistle and I'll come to you. Cloth-based horror.
Cloth. Yeah, cloth. Well, there's a thing a cloth or a sheet scare that I did think worked really well was in Paranormal Activity 3 when there's a section or a sequence where they set the camera on a sort of on a ceiling fan, I think it is, but they set it on the table, so it's kind of drifting back and forward, and of course at one point it just passed and this sheet is standing, and then it just passed again, and it's either closer or it's not there at all. But it worked. It was a rare example of the ghost that is just a sheet.
A sheet, yeah. Well, Scooby-Doo has quite a lot of it as well, to varying degrees of effectiveness. But Okay, so Whistle I'll Come to You is a staunch recommendation. I suppose that's really what we're doing, is giving some recommendations of some nice Christmas
Things
nice Christmas horror. Even though, like I say, that none of the ghost stories for Christmas are set at Christmas time. They feel distinctively Christmassy to me somehow, but...
Same here.
Yeah.
And I suppose they were written for Christmas initially. So that was the thing. M.R. James would come up with these stories to... and then sort of... He'd have people over, students and colleagues and whatever else, of Christmas time, roughly. And he would then tell them these spooky tales.
Yeah.
And again, that's, going back to Charles Dickens, and also to Charles Dickens' things he said about growing up and hearing these stories. Like, I seem to remember hearing about Dickens' mother being concerned that the nurse who would look after him as a youngster would tell him stories. And it was like she didn't want... It was like it might have been a sort of aspirational sort of thing, because that was associated with with people of lower intelligence, and there was that kind of class issue at work, and then Dickens had to turn to penny dreadfuls and things like this to get his fix. There was so then that carries through, I suppose, to M.R. James. But again, why Christmas?
It's cold and spooky,
It's cold and spooky, yeah.
I think it might, may not. And generally you tend to have groups of people assembling together. So perfect place to be telling stories by a fire. Much like we do here by our fire.
By our fire, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing as well. Yeah. What is it? Is it the Signal Man? It is the Signal Man, where he's talking about he was looking into the fire and he started hearing these voices. It's that kind of thing. Because that was also another adaptation. But
perhaps Halloween wasn't quite as popular as it is now. So maybe there wasn't really a dedicated time of year to celebrate spooky stuff, unless you were some kind of practicing pagan, I suppose.
Well, over here, when I was growing up in pagan Ireland, we did make a pretty big deal of Halloween. So there's a park over there.
I mean, back in the 1800s, though.
Back in the 1800s, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because we didn't. I mean, they weren't too keen in England of encouraging the Irish to remember very much about Ireland. So Halloween was kind of out of the question. But I know that I always assumed Halloween was a big thing everywhere. And it was only when I moved to England that I heard people saying, it wasn't a thing. It's certainly people who had grown up in the 80s, 70s, they seemed to think it was some sort of American thing that we'd adopted, which was strange to me, because, as I said, we had bonfires, and it's almost become politicized now in Ireland. So areas that are more nationalist, with more of a leaning towards a united Ireland, have massive Halloween parades. And I mean, the one in Derry, Londonderry, is one of the biggest, it's talked about all over the world. And areas that aren't, areas that want to remain with the UK, they've kind of stepped away from it, like almost as if that's an IRA holiday.
Halloween co-opted by the IRA. Oh God, you can't even mention Halloween now without getting blown up.
I would love it if there were some equally indignant, I mean, we're continually making fun of the people who complain about the war on Christmas, right? But it would be nice if there were some people who were equally indignant about Halloween being taken away from them.
Yeah.
You can't even say Walpurgisnacht anymore without someone coming along and throwing a pumpkin at you.
He was in cells for 14 days for listening to Danzig.
They don't even pronounce Samhain properly because they don't have the W sound in their alphabet.
Sam who?
Sam who? Sam Hain.
Anyway, but yeah, maybe that's the reason why ghost stories became associated with Christmas. Though, if we didn't really have a dedicated, I'm not sure about the history of it, but maybe we didn't have the normal people didn't have a dedicated time of year to be telling spooky stories. So maybe Christmas was as good a time as any.
Good time as any, yeah.
Back in the 1800s, anyway.
Yeah, and it has that thing. Whether the M.R. James stories being read at the time or on TV, that, as you say, that there's a sense of it's weird. It's like there has, for me anyway, it feels like there needs to be a sort of sense of a communal experience of some sort. So it's M.R. James talking to people gathered in the gloom, sort of, rather than M.R. James going around the individual houses and telling a story to them at different times when it's convenient.
They must have hated
so there's
him.
that. There's a sense of
that M.R. James visit every year. 3 knocks on the door. Oh no, here he is. What's it going to be about this time? A haunted napkin, I expect.
But yeah, so I guess the TV adaptations at the time anyway were doing the same thing, because when they would have gone out, I mean,
everyone would be watching.
Yeah, and I suppose
that's kept up in. One of the things I've got written down as a recommendation is The Woman in Black. Either the book or I'm not sure if I know Daniel Radcliffe's the Harry Potter film adaptation of it doesn't involve Christmas at all, but in the book and the stage play, and I'm not sure about the 1989 version, but in the book and the stage play, the framing device of it is him having grown up, telling his story of this haunting that has followed him throughout his life.
That's right. He's like
at
a
Christmas
smoke or
time.
something, isn't he? And he's like, he says that they're in there telling stories, and he's gonna.
They're all telling ghost stories, and he decides to go and tell his one at Christmas time. So that's obviously harkening back to that tradition as well, and that's very good. If you are lucky enough to be in London around Christmas time, definitely go and see The Woman in Black. There's nothing more Christmassy than that to me.
Yes, I didn't see it at Christmas, I don't think, but yeah, I mean that's something, all right. And I don't remember either if the TV adaptation starts the same way as the book.
I don't think it has the framing device, so no, it may not have Christmas in it at all. But the stage version certainly does. It's him actually working with an actor, trying to figure out a way to deliver a performance of a dramatization of his haunting. The stage play is really scary, I think.
Yeah,
you wouldn't think a stage play could be as scary as it is, but it is. So, no good to any of you in the US, but
well, I think even the TV adaptation, which was by a rival of the BBC, it was ITV made that.
That's right, yeah. And that may not have anything to do with Christmas, but it certainly feels Christmassy enough for the same reason as Whistle and I'll Come to You does. It just seems like it's aimed at that kind of
Yeah, and it's someone who is isolated in this kind of bleak sort of landscape with a lot of fog, a lot of mist. So I mean, that works for me the same way those ones do.
Yeah, well, it's sort of a pastiche of M.R. James, E.F. Benson type horror stories anyway, and those are all good Christmassy stories. I mean, E.F. Benson brings us on to fuck me. Sorry, I got spooked by a Christmas ghost.
So in kind of in one bit of preparation I did do was have a look to see what people were talking about online in sort of lists of the best horror films, winter themed. And some of those I felt that works for me, and then others don't. And then
it's the same with the Die Hard debate, isn't it? It's like, is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not?
Well, yeah.
I mean, so maybe. Christmas
I
is
suppose it
in it.
raises the question: what if you were to think of a spooky or anything in that line that you would connect to this time of year? What are the elements that would be at work? Are there things across the various examples that you can think of that do, that recur?
Well, we've already established that they don't need to be set at Christmas, for one,
No,
or have Christmas in them at all.
no.
Whistle I'll Come To You certainly doesn't. So, yeah, then, Gremlins, for instance, is set at Christmas, and to me, that's a Christmas movie. That feels like a Christmas horror movie, because it has, I think, stuff to say about Christmas as well.
Yeah.
So that to me is that counts. Whereas something like Inside, for instance, the French movie, L'Intérieur, is set at Christmas. I think it's set on Christmas Eve, but I wouldn't. That to me doesn't feel like a Christmas movie. That feels like it could have been set at any old time.
I was going to put that to the test, but I didn't get around to it, to watching Inside it again, because as you say, it is set at Christmas, but it doesn't. I mean, unless I suppose if someone's got a baby coming and someone's determined to kill it, I suppose there's something a bit Christmas.
I imagine that's probably in there somewhat. It's the birth of, but not really. Like, to me, it doesn't especially feel like one. Same with Day of the Beast. Is set at Christmas.
That's right, it is, yeah.
Yeah, but you have to sort of remember that. It doesn't feel important enough to the plot to qualify it as a Christmas horror. And I suppose, it's horror adjacent. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call it an outright horror. That's very good, though, Day of the Beast. I think you turned me on to that one.
Yeah, it's... I heard about it. There used to, on British telly in the mid '90s, there were a lot of shows. I guess you would say magazine type shows, as they say, things like The Word and things like this were a bit outrageous and a bit, and they would have various bits and pieces to do with strange carry-ons, and they would have music performances and whatnot. And anyway, one of those was a show called Hotel Babylon, I think. Mm-hmm. I remember I'd set the video recorder for it because Green Day were on this occasion, and in that episode they mentioned, I don't know why, I don't, but there was a section devoted to this Spanish horror film, Day of the Beast.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was. I didn't know it made much of a splash at the time. I suppose it did.
Well, it was a long time before I didn't see it until eventually it showed up again on British telly. But that was, I mean, why that film? I don't know why they included that, but they did. But yeah, it was a long time before I saw it, and for a long time that was the only film of Alex de la Iglesia. Yeah,
de la Iglesia means of the church.
Yes.
Christmas. Anyway, his name is more Christmassy than the movie, though.
But yeah, when I was looking at those, winter horror pictures, and so a few months ago, in a similar bit of list reading, I had been looking up horror westerns that felt like horror films for whatever reason. I just watched High Plains Drifter for the first time in many years, and I was thinking, I wonder, because that feels. Well, it used to feel more like a horror film. It doesn't feel so much like that now, it seems. But there are elements in it. It's a supernatural kind of feeling. So I was looking up lists of that, and you've got your, the original Django and things like this are mentioned. But also mentioned was Ravenous. Antonia, which I'd never seen, even though I really liked Antonia Bird. And even though Ravenous had kind of developed a sort of cult following of a sort over the years, but... So I got hold of it then, but I still didn't watch it until I was looking at these lists of winter horrors, and that was frequently cited. So I did get around to it, and I realized that so the reason why it would be mentioned in these lists is because it's set in the snow and it's a sort of Civil
You
War.
mean Ravenous? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of snow.
There's a lot of snow, but I was thinking, well, it doesn't feel wintry though to me, even though there's lots of snow. But then there's a scene about 20 minutes in where they're in a hut. So it's back in post-Civil War times, sort of Western expansion stuff. And there are these soldiers gathered, and one appears eventually, and they bring him in. And there's a scene where he's sitting explaining where he's come from and what has happened. And it's Robert Carlyle of Train Spotting fame, and he's telling them the story about how he was with this company, and something happened, and
they all ate
he was
each
running
other.
out of food. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he ended up having to eat people. Basically, is what it is. But that scene is set in this very cramped, sort of dark space with a fire, and that did feel. When that happened, I was like, all right, okay, well, this feels right. But the snow and stuff didn't, which is kind of weird because it's not. So what I realized was, for me, it's not the cold bit that feels wintry. It's the bit with the warmth. So it's the fire that feels. All right, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that somewhat about the Hateful Eight, the Tarantino picture, which I think did come out around Christmas time, or certainly that's when I saw it, and that felt Christmassy enough. I think it might even be set at Christmas time.
There's certainly it's very snowy.
It's awfully snowy, and there's a fire in a cabin. Maybe that's all you need.
I guess it maybe come out. Maybe it did come out at Christmas, but also that would have been sort of the time when awards things would be going on. So,
Screeners, yeah, and that might be how I saw it. Now I think of it, but so that sort of counted. But then you have so I also had to look at some lists just to see if there were any I was missing out, and what turned up on a few of them was Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Which is set at Christmas. That is not something I would call a Christmas movie of any kind, let alone horror. But what do you think about that?
Well, Eyes Wide Shut. Well, this is the thing. This is again something that I didn't do quick enough, but that's something because I know you're a big fan of that film. Or you used to be. Maybe you've.
I like it. I like it a lot more. A lot of people tend to write it off as shit. And just say, oh, well, that was Stanley Kubrick losing his faculties. It was rubbish, overlong. Tom Cruise stars Nicole Kidman was rubbish. All of that. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But is it my favorite film? No, very far from that. But yeah, there's a lot wrong with it. But I like it a fair amount.
Well, I have it because for a long time I really did not like Stanley Kubrick's films. I always liked maybe the first half hour of them. So the first half hour of Full Metal Jacket, everyone knows that's great. The rest of it, who can be bothered? The first half hour of Clockwork Orange is great. The rest of it, I get the idea. The Shining half hour, fantastic. Then I get the idea. So, but I always thought, but Doctor Strangelove is different because that's the one that's really good the whole way through. And I was so opposed to the notion of Stanley Kubrick that when I was doing. So I eventually ended up teaching film studies, but through that whole time of undergraduate and postgraduate and whatnot, I had never seen 2001, and I refused to see it eventually. And I thought, no, that's going to be my thing. I'm someone who refuses to watch 2001. And then
Taking
one night,
a stand.
Yeah, it's about time. Someone did.
Yeah.
So one night I was ill with a flu or something, and I had run out of stuff that was near hand. But for some reason, I did have a copy of 2001, even though I had no intention of ever watching it. Maybe that was part of it. That was even more.
To have it, to look at it and say, I will never watch you, you stupid. Yeah.
But I put it on that night, and it was over much sooner than I expected. And I thought, that's really good. Which felt horrible. It was like, oh man, you give in for that's really good. Oh. But last year, I had reason to see it again. And this time I was like, holy fuck! It, something had happened to it in that time, and all of a sudden I was seeing this incredible, astonishing thing that everyone else saw, where I just saw something that was pretty good. And that changed everything. And then suddenly The Shining was different. No, it was brilliant the whole way through. So there was a whole, and plus 2001 was way scarier and eerier than I remembered. Because I didn't really remember it being scary or eerie at all. But it is. It feels like I think I said to you at the time, it feels fucking folk horror almost. You know, there's this thing that appears. Nobody knows why it's there. It's been there forever, and it doesn't matter where human beings go, it's there. And so there's those. Is it the moon that it lands on, where they're kind of walking? It's somewhere, not Earth anyway.
Well, Stanley Kubrick himself went to the moon.
He went to the moon. Yes.
That's probably where they shot it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the theorists will tell you that you know, he made a mess of that because when the hatchet comes through the door of the moon, the shadow lands on Malcolm McDowell the wrong way. Like if it was really coming through, it would have hit him from below.
Yeah.
But
you can see the shadow of a helicopter on the moon. Anyway.
And they're playing Pogs at one point. There's Pog championships.
It's an
but yeah, so that changed everything. So the point was at that time, I went through various different Stanley Kubrick films and had my... And that just felt shit. It was like, oh, for fuck's sake. So now not only is it that you've seen this thing, but you're just somebody else who thinks it's wonderful.
But where did you land on Eyes Wide Shut?
Eyes Wide Shut, I have not yet gone back to, because I don't think I made it with eyes wide open any more than maybe half an hour of it ever. Again, maybe because I expected that half an hour would be as much as I would need. So I have it. So and I too saw it come on those lists, and then I thought. So I'm quite glad if you're saying that actually no, it doesn't really feel like that at all. I feel like I was okay too.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't include it in the discussion. It is set at Christmas, and it is eerie. It is spooky, but not. It doesn't have whatever. I suppose we're trying to very loosely define what constitutes a Christmas movie. I'm not one of those people who's indignant about Die Hard. People argue about that, and that seems to me silly. It's like, if it feels like something you should watch around Christmas time, then that is about all that matters, I think. Like a lot of people suggest the Harry Potter films for Christmas time, because usually they have a sequence which involves Christmas.
Yes.
And they were also released, I think all of them were released in December. So in the pictures. So I remember it going to see them as a kid in the cinemas around Christmas time. So they are associated somewhat with Christmas for me. However, the Lord of the Rings films, which were also released around that time, are not. Peter Jackson's King Kong was released around Christmas, and to me feels like, in my head now, it's a Christmas movie. Even though
it's got the ice and the ice skating and
he goes to New York and there's some ice there, and I'm not sure if that's meant to be around Christmas time. I don't think so, but yeah.
The third Harry Potter feels to me like a good fit. Like for at least a lot of the time, it feels like it's a good fit.
It's got a lot of snow in it.
It's snow and it's frosty and it's got the Dementors in the train and it's creepy in an appropriate sort of way.
That's about what defines a Christmas movie. I don't think it goes much further than that. If enough people say this feels like something that should be watched at Christmas, then there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's the thing. And I suppose as well. I mean. It's for me anyway. It's difficult for things. So just thinking of how the ghost stories for Christmas and whatnot work or feel. There's something about the distance from it, and the grain and the way it was shot and everything else. that and that aesthetic thing feels so it's difficult for something produced now to do the same thing for me that does.
Well, yeah, certainly I've recently learned with because they're still doing these Christmas ghost stories on the BBC, but now it seems to be entirely in the purview of Mark Gatiss from League of Gentlemen.
Yeah.
Is it Gatiss or Gatiss? I've never said it out loud. It's Gatiss, isn't it?
I've never Mark Gatiss. I've said Gatiss.
I've been saying Gatiss, yeah, but I've never been pulled up on it, so I'm assuming it's Gatiss. Anyway, he's been doing it because all of the League of Gentlemen loved, were greatly influenced by that kind of stuff, as well as plenty of other folk horror and stuff like that. But so he's got a lot of love in his heart for it. He knows the source material like the back of his hand, and you would think, well, there's no more perfect person to continue to helm these, but unfortunately, not to be too harsh, but unfortunately, he's really shit at it. He's not good at it. He's done off the top of my head. The most recent one was the is it Count Magnus? Curious Case of Curious Case of Count the Case of Count Magnus?
Well, the episode I think is just called Count Magnus.
But I think the story. So they're all I think they're all M.R. James adaptations. He did the Tractate Middith
and the Mezzotint.
The Mezzotint,
Yeah.
Mezzotint. Unfortunately, they're shit, and they're not good. They have everything. Everything is at his disposal, but there's something about the way they look, the way they're acted, the way they're just put together, which, I understand that the BBC don't want to put out something obviously kind of feeling antiquated because they need people to watch it. So I understand them giving it modern production values and stuff like that. And they did this also. They remade Whistle and I'll Come to You with John Hurt.
Yeah,
about 10 years ago,
nobody.
which was horrid. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And they updated it again, trying to think, okay, well, a modern audience isn't going to be scared by a random bit of cloth chasing this bloke around. So we need to give it emotional depth and quote unquote character development, TM. So it's like his wife is dead and he's all sad about that, and he's going off, to go on a holiday to remember her, but it's rubbish. It's not as good. You don't need that. You just need an old bumbling academic who doesn't say anything being chased by a bit of cloth down a beach.
Exactly. It tells its own tale. You don't need. But yeah, I agree with the. I mean, the Mark Gatiss, Marky G.
Marky G.
There are some quite awful decisions that he makes. I guess they're short. There's always that.
Mercifully short. They don't feel short though. The pacing is terrible.
No,
especially in this most recent one. It felt longer than it needed to be.
Yeah, because there's not a. I mean, now we're almost contradicting ourselves because there's not. It just goes to show, I suppose, the difference between you give Jonathan Miller something with not a huge amount on page going on, and you get that, and you give Mark D.G. And it's very obvious that he has very little to work with. That could be.
But in the same way that Whistle and I'll Come to You, you could argue pads itself out by having lots of scenes of Michael Hordern eating an egg, or sort of sitting at a breakfast table mumbling to himself. But it feels like there's some suspense in that. In the because you're like, well, obviously this is going to get spooky at some point. But how? And it's just eerie anyway. You're like, who is this? Why is he acting like that? Like, why is he behaving this way? And you never really. But in the Count Magnus one, I think that was definitely a big influence. Michael Hordern's performance as the protagonist in Whistle and I'll Come to You seems to be what Mark Gatiss has shown to what's his name? Is it Jason Watkins or Jason Watkins? Right, the guy who plays the protagonist in Count Magnus. It's like he's shown him that and being like, oh, be a bit like that.
Yeah, I can see that.
But you've got a bunch of dialogue too. So he's having to give this, and he's a good actor, but
Yeah.
he's having to give this very kind of eccentric performance, which doesn't feel like it fits in with the world around him or the story that's being told, or the more specifically the dialogue. Michael Hordern can get away with doing all his Mr. Bean stuff because he doesn't have any dialogue to say. Really, that's
true.
That's his character from the beginning. Whereas this one, it's like a script was written and then the direction was do Michael Hordern, which completely didn't work at all, and it just wasn't scary. That there's one scare in that. This, by the way, was released the other day. It was I think on
it was like
Christmas
Friday
Eve.
The 23rd. Is that right?
23rd or 24th. So very fresh in my mind, unfortunately. I just didn't think it was. I didn't think it was any good. There was one particular scare, probably the biggest scare in the entire thing, which involved. Did you watch it? You watched it, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It had a flashback of something terrible that had befallen these two hunters or poachers or something, and you get a kind of jump cut to the results, which is one of them's had their face skinned off. Now, when you read that in an M.R. James book, it's important because you're sort of trying to imagine what that could look like. There's descriptions of it being so horrifying that people were passing out over seeing the remains of this person. But then they decide to just go ahead and show it in this, and it looks like something straight out of a joke shop.
Yeah,
like a face with big bulging eyes going, with its skin all torn off. It just looks terrible, and I'm like, this would never have gone into one of the 70s ones. It's just shit. It's just not good.
Well, I think you've just said what I tried to say and kind of lost what I was trying to say. But yeah, that's the thing. What works on paper, often it works because of what it hasn't told you. It's just told you enough.
Yeah.
So you're concocting all sorts of things, but yeah, as you say, I mean that. Although more, the one he did. I'm not sure if it was last year. It was maybe a couple of years ago, but he did a adaptation of Marty G. Did Martin's Close.
Oh yeah, I don't think I saw this one.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't think it would sway you one way or the other, but it's so it's a kind of court case. This person is accused of murdering a woman. He's a kind of of nobility, and this is a sort of a scrubber that he's been wasting his time with, and so he's in the court. And actually, Peter Capaldi is the lawyer or whatever. But he sees the guy in the dock sees this woman as a ghost. Did you ever see the Hammer horror The Reptile?
No.
Well, there's a Hammer film of that name, and it's about. I mean, they feel quite Christmassy too, actually. But there's one about this woman, and she's got the face of essentially a snake. And for whatever reason, Marky G thought it would be a good idea to show us what this spook looks like, and she looks like that, which is a bit silly. And she does this kind of juddering kind of. It's yeah, but overall, that bit aside, I think that of what I've seen of his ones. That works best for me. It's still not especially great or anything, and part of the reason why it works is it does the different things that I would want it to do. So one of the things the BBC did at a time, you probably remember, was they would have the ghost stories for Christmas, but it would be Christopher Lee sort of reading to you for 15 minutes or whatever. And there would be no real dramatization, if I remember correctly. It was just him by a fire, basically, reading to you. And this does that. So the framing is a modern day. I assume he looks to be dressed for the occasion of being alive now. And he's sitting in an armchair.
Got a big cap on. And
So, well, he's sitting there, he's just telling you, oh, yes, I came across... I can't. I don't think he says I'm going to tell you a story or anything. I think he's probably saying what it says in the text. The M.R. James. He says he buys or he collects rare manuscripts and court transcripts and whatnot. And he's come across this one, and he's going to tell us now what goes on in it. And then it is dramatized, the goings on in the courtroom, the flashback to what happened and whatnot. So that one, it was pleasant enough. It was
Okay.
but again, it didn't feel like the other ones, and I suppose because I think it's weird because there's a nostalgia element, even if you didn't grow up with the things in question, Whistle and I Come to You, because you were born way after they happened. Because they have a certain age and grain and whatnot, they still stir a sort of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And I guess Christmas time is people going back to somewhere that's comforting. I'm driving home for Christmas. He's not driving to Ibiza for Christmas. He's driving home. So I suppose that nostalgia thing plays into that because you're going back somewhere. And obviously something produced in 2020, whatever this is, well, it isn't going to feel like that.
I think that's a good point. But then again, I spoke to my dad about this just recently, and he saw these, this golden age of ghost stories for Christmas when they aired. But he felt at the time that, these are really, really good and valuable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult because we're working with stuff that isn't really that good.
I think that's quite a pertinent point. But then again, though, to keep on with Marky G, who was involved in the League of Gentlemen, the other people who seem to be keeping up the tradition somewhat are the other League of Gentlemen's, the Risha Smith and Steve Pemberton, who are currently doing Inside Number 9, and they have produced now 2 Christmas specials of a sort. Christmas episodes, anyway. And they just did one recently. I think it was released the same day as Mark Gaddis's offering, and called The Bones of St. Nicholas. And I'm going to preface this by saying sorry, Reese, because he seems to magically know whenever someone anywhere has criticized something that he's done, and get very angry about it. Unfortunately, I didn't think this latest one was very good. But the one they did before, The Devil of Christmas,
with the Krampus business?
The Krampus, it was. I suppose the plot within the plot was about the Krampus, but it was presented like a director giving a director's commentary to an old 70s kind of...
That's right, yeah.
Yeah,
I forgot about that element.
Yeah, so this really was a direct callback to this kind of thing. So it was... it was presented like a 1970s... is there a particular name for that style of... that style
like TV play?
Film? TV play,
play for
like a
type stuff?
Exactly, yeah, like a Nigel Neal kind of thing, kind of like Beasts or something like that. About this family going to a cabin and the Krampus coming and causing trouble, but it's it's deliberately kind of generic. The film or the TV episode within the episode or whatever is what it is, but it's framed by, I think it's Derek Jacobi doing what seems to be a director's commentary on it and kind of pointing out things that went wrong and things about the actors, things about the actresses or whatever. And then, but there's a twist ending to it, which I won't give away because I do recommend people go and watch that.
And it's still, as far as I know, it's still like on iPlayer and stuff, I think.
Most likely. Yeah, you can certainly watch it out here if you have, I think, BritBox or something like that. It was on HBO for a while, but anyway, that I think was quite good. I know some people weren't sure about the ending. I quite liked it, and that to me, that felt like a worthy entry into the Christmas horror special canon. And then also the League of Gentlemen Christmas special from
That's
way
right,
back when. Which I just watched that again recently, and I think that's very, very good. That's done in the Amicus anthology kind of style. It's 3 different stories with a framing device. With that one, though, I sort of hesitate to recommend it, because if you're not already familiar with the League of Gentlemen and its characters, it may be less good. But I think it is designed to not be too self-referential, so I think it more or less holds up on its own.
Well, that's maybe that probably makes sense on the whole, but my own experience of it was the opposite of that. I really didn't like League of Gentlemen at all.
Oh, really?
I thought it was repulsive. I thought it was fucking horrible.
Well, there you go.
Not in a. There was just a lot of stuff at that time that was going out of its way to be as mean-spirited and as. I didn't. So I don't know why I.
Bear in mind, I didn't see the League of Gentlemen until way, way later. Then it finished airing in the early 2000s, and I didn't see it until probably the late 2000s.
Yeah.
So maybe it didn't have that same.
Well, what I did was I watched a couple of episodes. I decided I hate this, and then for some reason I watched the Christmas special, and I thought it was incredible. So then I was like, maybe but I still didn't. When I went back, I still don't like the first 2 series. But I like the Christmas special a lot, and I like the 3rd series, which most people would say has very little relation to the first 2 at all. It
is different, yeah.
It's like 6 stories, all circling the same incident, kind of. If I remember. But the Christmas special, I thought were really. I mean, that was something else. I was properly.
Yeah, and that to me felt like, I mean, as we've said, they were all, knee deep in the history of like British TV horror, and the Christmas special was definitely a kind of callback to that, and has plenty of direct references as well to to other things like the Ghost Story for Christmases and stuff. But that I think is one of the few things that has managed to capture the same spirit, whereas Mark Gatiss on his own, I don't think can.
When I looked it up to see, because I didn't know there was a new one until you mentioned it, and then I couldn't remember what ones I'd seen or hadn't seen, so they just had 4, but the new one was in the middle of them, like they weren't listed sort of chronologically. So I had to Google to see which one it was. And I saw the Guardian review for this one, which was like 2 out of 5 or whatever. And the person reviewing it said, is doing like in Mean Girls when the character tries to force a saying to become a thing. It's like they're like Mark E.G. continues trying to do that with his yearly ghost stories for Christmas that are really
a bit crap.
I can't imagine that in 30, 40 years time people are going to be really excited that those Mark E.G. Christmas ghost things have been issued on holodeck or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? And that there doesn't seem to be much else trying to offer a similar thing, but perhaps better. At least not that I know of. Perhaps there is some stuff out there that is kind of filling those shoes.
Yeah, I can think of things that feel appropriate, like The Others, for example.
Well, yeah, but they're. That's 20 years old now. I'm talking about something that's that's still being done to try and keep the tradition alive. I think Mark Gatiss is nobly trying, and the Inside Number 9 guys are nobly trying, but with not great results most of the time.
And also, I mean, they because you'd said about first hearing about Whistle and I'll Come to You and the Signal Man. I think you mentioned the Signal Man. But I remember as well when I first heard people talking about those, and it was when the BFI released them
Yeah.
on DVD.
Mm.
And I think that was the first time I heard people talking about them, and then it seemed to build from that, and suddenly it was talked about a lot. So there was that period of absence, I suppose, where people hadn't seen this thing, and Marky G and the Inside Number 9 lads won't have that because now they can't be absent for that long. Do you know what I mean? So it can't develop any sort of mystique or anything.
Yeah,
because it's always going to be there somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, they're at a disadvantage, but I do think if they were really, really good, they would have stood the test of time regardless. And people. I mean, think about something like It's a Wonderful Life, right? Which is now a quintessential Christmas movie. It came out apparently did quite badly at the box office and gained its notoriety now from being cheap for TV stations to buy at Christmas time by licensing.
Yeah, they fucked up the it went into the public domain much quicker than it should have done.
Is that right? Yeah, something like that.
A bit like Night of the Living Dead, I suppose. There was a bugger up somewhere along the line. So yeah, that was it. But
it got played at Christmas, and then just by virtue of that happening, became what it is. It also helps that it's quite good.
Yes. And it's also another sort of Christmas Carol thing in it, to an extent.
Where it sort of just becomes part of the culture. Because everyone, a lot of people I don't think have actually read A Christmas Carol. And I hadn't even read it the whole way through, I don't think, until a few years ago. Because I assumed that I had, because it was the story is so well known now. I don't think that's going to happen with Mark Gaddis's Count Magnus.
No.
And I don't think it should, because it was shit. But but I don't think it would be impossible for something to come along now that did achieve that kind of longevity, I suppose is the word. But no one's doing it. But people need to get their act together and just do it.
Maybe it's also that Mark Gaddis is very much tapping into something that was already there.
There's already been,
So maybe
he can't really hope to do better at. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and maybe the thing that needs to happen is something that nobody's expecting. I mean, I don't know if anyone was gathered. I don't even know if the BBC or whoever even really thought of it as a thing, or if it's only in the wake of the DVD reissues and everything else that gathered these things together. That they've kind of retroactively said that it was a thing, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe.
Yeah, my dad certainly seemed to think it was at the time that you would look forward to it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I think it was.
So it was definitely known that at Christmas time you would get
something like that would be coming out. Yeah, and even with things like what probably Shellac and the Painter is a bit of an outlier in that it doesn't really nothing. That is probably the only one which I would say isn't very Christmassy. I don't know if I would call it a Christmas horror, because it... Actually, was that one released at Christmas? I think it was.
Well, it tends to be bundled up with them, anyway.
It's bundled with them. But yeah, that one is a bit of an outlier. It's very good, but it's not Christmas good. Yeah, but then... I remember... part of the tradition, kind of like what I was saying about how Harry Potter feels Christmassy, but Lord of the Rings somehow doesn't. Even though they were both released at that time of year, and you would get the DVDs for Christmas. So getting a DVD for Christmas ties it to that time of year for me somehow as well. So, but also DVD covers. So I remember. And this is apparently a common experience across nations, because my American friend Max had the same exact experience of being in the in the video shop, Blockbuster or whatever, and seeing the front cover of a 1997, I think, horror called Jack Frost.
Oh yeah.
Which had a big scary snowman face on it.
Not to be confused with the much more disturbing Michael Keaton.
The Michael Keaton as the magical snowman one. Yeah, which I was familiar with at that time, and then when I went to rent that from the video store, I would have to go quite near this other, far more sinister Jack Frost, which had an 18 certificate, which I'm sure if it was resubmitted probably isn't warranted. I haven't seen the film. I've still not seen the scary Jack Frost because I want to keep that memory of it being frightening to me.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with that.
No, I'm sure I'd be disappointed.
Or the Ginger Dead Man, of course.
The Ginger Dead Man's another one, yeah. Yeah, and I was wondering about that. Like, were there any other... Like, did Ghoulies ever do Christmas? No, I don't think so.
No, they went to college.
They went to college. No time for Christmas. They're busy with their academic studies. You had... I don't know. There were a few DVDs like that which remind me of Christmas, even though I've never seen them. Just covers.
Yeah,
Jack Frost is pretty much the main one. Ginger Dead Man.
Dead Man. Yeah.
I don't feel like I need to investigate them much further though. I prefer just keeping them in my head as an image that I associate with Christmas time. Yeah.
What one that I did hear?
Seen them.
No, I don't. I probably saw the Ginger Dead Man at some point. There's a group, or there's a community, society, whatever, the British Academy of Film and Television Screen Studies, although it's called the acronym, which that's too mathematical for me to figure out. BA, whatever. Yeah. So they have various special interest groups, and one of them is to do with horror. And maybe a month ago or less, there was a sort of research seminary thing to do with Christmas. And in the course of that, it's on YouTube, actually. They upload these things to YouTube. But one fellow who was talking, the guy Steve Jones, not you fucking not him, you fucking arsehole. He said they were asking what you would recommend for Christmas viewing, and what he recommended was Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, which apparently has no connection with the other Silent Night, Deadly Nights. It's not about a murderous Santa. It's about pagan. It's by Brian Usna, first of all, and apparently it's got pagan cults, and it's got a weird Cronenberg type body horror and parasite worm things. So that seems to be inching towards the Jack Frost end of the scale, but apparently that's quite something. So I believe.
I'll take that. But yeah, you were telling me about that seminar, and someone was also suggesting The Conjuring 2 as a Christmas movie.
Yeah, well,
a Christmas horror.
It was just after we had done our explosive, quite literally, I suppose, Amityville 2 number. So it was very soon after that. So that was already in my mind anyway. So they had because they were talking as well, I guess, about American traditions. I have trouble concentrating these days so much. So sometimes I'll fade out and fade back in. And when I fade it back in, they've been talking about British traditions, much like we were. And then it was, is there anything, in America that's comparable? So I wasn't part of the actual active live discussion, but I was commenting on the sidelines. And so I mentioned Amityville, which is, as we now are aware, Christmas related.
Yeah.
And then somebody else just said, yeah, actually, and on that, I suppose The Conjuring 2 as well is Christmassy. And then, they were very, which I guess it is, it's got Christmas trappings. None that really stood out for me when I thought back to it, but
no,
maybe I just wasn't really, I didn't retain a whole lot of it.
And it was released in the summer.
Yeah.
It was released in the summer. That almost invalidates it to me.
It does, but apparently what I also learned through that is that in Germany, for some reason, Gremlins was released in June or something, like in the summer sometime. So it may be that because James Wan apparently said he wanted it. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted it to be a sort of Christmas ghosty movie.
He always wants to do something good, doesn't he? I think he said that about every film he's done. He's like, I want it to be a good horror, scary movie, and unfortunately, it never is. But he'll get there one day, maybe.
Well,
once he's done putting all those horror characters into his Aquaman films.
Yeah.
Fucking Annabelle's turning up in the Aquaman. What are you doing? Anyway.
Seriously, that's serious.
That's real. Yeah.
Oh my god. Well.
Yeah. The manufacturers of Raggedy Ann must be furious they're not getting the money from that. Instead, the traumatized descendant of the Warrens is picking up some. Anyway. All right. Well, yeah. I don't know if I had that much to say. I have some notes here. I was gonna say, but obviously I wrote these notes and then didn't clarify what I was meant to say about them because I was just like, oh, I'll be good enough to write August Underground's 3. But I don't think I have much to say about it. There is a Christmas scene in it. There's a Christmas home invasion. So there's that. Better Watch Out is a film that was made about Christmas and it's horror.
That's the one with the babysitter?
Yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I think, Is she a babysitter? Yeah, she is, yeah.
And then, there's a... Yeah, well, we won't say it in case people... Because it's quite good. I like that one.
I remember it being alright. Krampus.
Yeah.
I like that. Like that sort of deserves a place near enough to Gremlins, sort of along those lines. But a lot of people don't seem to like that one very much. I like it.
I like it, and it does. It's one of the ones that does use snow correctly.
Yes,
the bits where they're outside, that works. He's very good at what's his name again?
Michael Dougherty.
Yes,
I think.
He's good at late in the year ambience. And
because just doing holidays because he did Trick or Treat as well.
Trick or Treat really
about Halloween.
And it felt and Krampus. I suppose Krampus is the other thing, which
Krampus does it all because it also does the the kind of National Lampoon's Christmas family.
Yes.
Dysfunctional family awkwardness. It's got all
and
of
it
that.
does the totting at people who are buying too much.
It does. It begins with that. Yeah, it begins with a long montage of people doing Black Friday.
Yeah.
Which actually... I don't think there's much... Black Friday has that reputation for people trampling over everyone in stores trying to get stuff. Yeah. I don't think Christmas does. But... Maybe it used to. I don't know. Jingle All the Way also has a bit of that going on.
Yeah,
the Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle.
It's always feels quite sneery.
Yeah, and definitely Krampus comes pretty close to sneering at. I mean, they're in National Lampoon's. What's his name? The Quaid, Randy Quaid's family.
Oh right. Oh yeah, Randy. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a kind of. What's the word? Not Avatar, but that family is in Krampus too.
Analog.
David Ketch. No, Analog. Thank you. And it definitely comes close to feeling a bit sneery, and but I think it goes both ways because you have them being a kind of middle class hoity-toity family, and then them being a kind of more rough and ready redneck kind of family. But I think it balances it well enough. Personally.
Well, I mean, it's nothing. I mean, there's been other things doing the same thing. But it is. I mean, it's like underneath. I guess there is a similar Christmas Carol sort of thing about you're missing the point, But Krampus and certain other films that do the same thing feel very much like they might have that Dickens influence somewhere back, but they feel a lot more like Scrooge than they do, in that they are disgusted by people who are lesser and yet acting like.
Although, what I will say about Krampus is, even though that is is definitely in there. Like, you know, the commercialization, well, the loss of the true spirit of Christmas, right? But the person who's actually being punished in it, the target of Krampus, isn't the upper middle class family who are neglectful and bickering and keeping up with the Joneses, and it isn't the lower class family who are, fat and gluttonous and obsessed with material things. It's the kid who wants to keep the spirit of Christmas alive, or thinks that they're all missing the point.
Yeah.
He's the one who Krampus comes after because he's given up on like trying.
That's right. Yeah.
He writes a letter to Santa, wishing everyone to, be nicer, basically. Kind of like Derek. And but he gets so flustered with everyone just not not being what he wants them to be, that he tears it up and says, like, fuck this. And that's what brings Krampus along.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what it's saying, but it is it's a fun enough Christmas John. It has haunted gingerbread men.
Yeah.
Haunted
and
Christmas
a Jack in the
toys
Box thing.
Yeah, big haunted Jack in the Box, and it's got Krampus, which I think I think he looks quite good.
He looks, yeah. I think I remember you describing it as genuinely grotesque.
It is pretty grotesque, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Because I played this, I hadn't seen it for quite a while, and then I've got a family, I got kids, and we have to figure out stuff to watch every Christmas without making it the same few things over and over again. Like A Christmas Story or fucking whatever. Miracle on 34th Street, which I find really difficult to sit through. But yeah, so this year I was like, let's give Krampus a go, whatever. And my wife's like, isn't that a bit scary? And I'm like, no, it's just gingerbread men running around being all mischievous and stuff. And yeah, put it on and it's a bit more grotesque than I remember. There's a fair bit of gore in there too. A fair bit of gore, and there's an F word.
I imagine there is, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the most concerning thing, but it's a PG-13 out here, so I thought it'll be fine.
Was it?
Yeah,
was
no,
it fine?
Well, they were all right with it. I think my daughter liked it. My 3-year-old daughter enjoyed it a lot, cheering when gingerbread ghosts got blown up. Yeah,
there you go. That's
yeah. So it's good. But the creature design of Mr. Krampus himself is, I think, quite effective. It is quite nasty. Yeah, he looks like a sort of
all the
old man.
Yeah, but and it all has that thing like there's a wee, like a sort of window on his head.
It's like his jaw's been dislocated, like a snake. It's quite good. But I don't think that one's really caught on. Sadly, I think that would be an all right one to. I think it's worthy of joining the list of films that you watch around Christmas time, especially with.
I guess they take a bit of time. And maybe sometimes, although as you say, Krampus wasn't. I don't remember getting bad reviews or anything.
I don't think it got slated, but I think people thought, it's
received kind of the same way Rare Exports was received.
Rare Exports as well.
And that again has not. Maybe it's too much like you're being. So I mean, what has kind of reached the canon? I know Elf, I suppose.
Elf, yeah. I was about to ask you that. Yeah, because what you were saying earlier about how it's difficult to kind of create the same context for something to become part of a tradition has kind of gone with the way that we consume things now. But so Elf, that's 2004. Has there been something more recent than that has come along?
I can't think of anything.
Come along and came to stay. I don't think so. Maybe not.
But it might be that something like. I don't know, like something Rare Exports. It feels like it's good, but maybe that's an issue. Maybe because people were being told at the time, "This is good. This is the one you're going to keep watching." maybe that instinctively people go, well, no, it's not. I'm not going to keep
Quite
watching.
possibly, yeah. I suppose it
And
does
it's
seem like
also
the ones that stick around almost do so by accident.
Yeah, or they're on
Except
TV
for-
enough, as you said.
Yeah.
Which
Well, like
rare
Home
exports.
Alone, definitely. Home Alone felt like it was designed to be what it is. Actually, that's another thing I could add into the canon of Grimmer Comfort's recommendations. Home Sweet Home Alone, the new Home Alone that came out in with Rob Delaney and Ellie Kemper as the invaders.
So what's the story
Well,
with that?
if you know the story of Home Alone, this won't be much of a surprise to you. But a child gets left home alone in a big mansion.
And is it good?
No, but it's the reason I would talk about it a little bit on this podcast is that it's fucking horrible. It's incredibly, it's grotesque and kind of gory in a way that the old ones, our Home Alones were not. I mean, you can look back on. Yeah, it feels a lot more leering than even though it tries to do two things at once. On the one hand, it humanizes the invaders. So whereas Joe Pesci and I forget the other guy's name, but those two
curly hair Joe,
the curly haired guy, while they're just bad guys basically who go in and rob houses at Christmas and never do anything nice. You could go back and I think looking at it, it's like, oh, it's a rich kid beating the fuck out of poor people who are driven to, theft because they have no.
Yeah, that's true. In this mansion, he's got with all these James Bond gadgets to his disposal.
Yeah, so you could look at that and go, well, yeah, that's not very good, but it's also kind of cartoony anyway. But in this one, they've tried to humanize the quote unquote villains, Rob Delaney and Ellie Kemper, by making them a very nice couple who the Home Alone kid, I don't remember who it is, some British kid randomly, they believe has stolen something from their house. They were doing an open house, they're in financial difficulty. Then Rob Delaney's mom had some doll that had a defect and he looks it up and it turns out that it's very valuable and it would save their house. But this kid who they got in an argument with when he visited the open house, it's kind of convoluted. They believe he stole it from them. So the reason they're trying to break into his house is to retrieve this doll. So yeah, it's far more focused on them than it is on the kid. But the kid does the same sequence of events happens with them trying to break into the house and getting maimed. But it's a lot more graphic than I remember the other two being. Well, the first two. There's a bit where Ellie Kemper, who's sort of lovely, like she's one of those actresses where everyone just sort of likes her. Kimmy Schmidt and from The Office and stuff like that. Getting, I think it's like thumbtacks or something all in her face and like right near her eye. There's one where it's right near her eye and there's a very long close up of her sort of pulling it out.
Christ.
And getting set on fire and getting Rob Delaney gets hit in the balls a lot by bowling balls and all sorts of things, which I know that was all part of the original, but it feels a lot more leering in this one, to the point where that whole sequence. I remember I was watching it with my stepson who was about 8 or 9 at the time and thinking like I might have to turn this off. It's quite nasty. It's pretty similar to that bit in August Underground 3.
Well, it sounds like it sounds more like the House by the Cemetery than Home Alone. It's like the Home Alone by the Cemetery.
Yeah, and it doesn't have. I think maybe because they think that early '90s kind of cartoony sound effects and the kind of classical score.
Yeah,
all of that. I think maybe they find a bit lame now. So there's less of that. There's less of the ambience of it feeling silly and cartoonish. It's more like a real film, but with all this kind of horrible stuff. It feels pretty misjudged, and it's pretty nasty.
remember the big innovation of in the first one when I was wee and I heard like my cousins talking about it, what they came away with was that your man gets hit in the face with an iron and the mark stays on his face
Yeah.
the whole way through. It doesn't go away. It's like,
Yeah. Granted, I haven't really watched those the original two, not the whole way. I mean, my stepson's been watching them over and over again, but I haven't sat down and watched them for a long time. But yeah, I remember being, like them sort of putting their heads in toilets and, it's silly, but you also don't feel they might as well be, boogeymen because they haven't been humanized at all. Whereas in this one, it's like, well, first we'll spend the first half of the movie humanizing them, and they're a family who are in financial trouble, and then let's watch them be tortured by this fat kid with a ton of money, and then. But then we'll make it all nice again at the ending, which they do. It was pretty awkward to me. I didn't like it.
yeah, I reckon
sent a very odd message, I think, if at all. Yeah. Whereas the message of Home Alone is, actually, yeah, there's not much of a message there either. Be grateful that your family are here, even if they suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which.
Just be happy you have a mansion. Even if some of your extended family are annoying. Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen that, but actually no, I will because
it's worth a watch. Along the same lines of like Terrifier 2. The same way that Terrifier 2 is a bit more nasty than other horror films we've been used to. Home Sweet Home Alone is a bit more nasty than family films you're used to.
Right, okay.
And I don't think it realizes quite how nasty it is. I think they kind of, I think they overshot a little bit.
Well, just on Terrifier and Damien and 2, that's actually something, the Omen 2, Damien, the Omen 2, has a wintry feel. Partly maybe because it was on TV a lot when I was wee, and also it's got the scene. Have you seen The Omen 2?
Yeah, long time ago though. I don't remember it as well as the third one, weirdly.
Of the different deaths that happen, one of them is they're out on a frozen lake, and Damien's cousin, relation, something. He falls under the ice. The ice breaks and he gets underneath, and then there's a scene where Damien is seemingly making it so that he can't find the way back up, and that always that's one of those films where it feels cold, and also I guess comforting in its way. And I was thinking, well, that feels quite festive, even though the Omen 3 is the one that has the actual slaughter of the innocents in.
That's right.
But yeah, because. Well, I guess it goes back to that thing about what makes it feel wintry, and it's not just. So, for example, The Thing does not feel like a wintry film to me. It's just a film that takes place somewhere that is cold all the time. But The Fog does feel right, and maybe that's because it's got all the elements at play. It's this isolated community. It starts with a kind of campfire ghost story. And there's a lot of fog and mist, so it's got all the stuff. So of the John Carpenter things, that the one you tend to hear mentioned is The Thing for this time of year. But to my mind, The Fog is much more because it's ghosts and it's.
Well, I suppose that's another thing. I didn't really consider this, but since what seems to define a Christmas spook to you is a kind of gloomy atmosphere with fog and such. And now I'm thinking about what my Christmas day was like in here in California, where a lot of movies are made. It was 80 degrees Fahrenheit out, sunny, blue skies. So maybe that's partly the reason we don't really do the Christmas ghost stories out here.
Possibly,
then,
you don't have the.
Because in the US, it's one of two things. It's either weirdly sunny and you all laugh about how it's Christmas Day but the sun's out, or you're snowed in because there's been a horrible, like, what do they call it, like a ballistic storm or something like that. So everything's just white, and that's it. But there isn't much in between. There isn't much of just that kind of cozy chill.
Yeah.
Or gloomy chill. For that matter, you know what really isn't a very Christmassy story at all?
What?
The Christmas story, the nativity. They're out in the desert in the Middle East, with a bunch of barnyard animals around.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's not very Christmassy.
One dramatization.
Oh, you hear them now. They're saying that even the birth of our Lord isn't Christmas.
They can't even mention donkeys.
You can't even mention a donkey. Unless it's been prepared halal.
Anyway, yeah.
There's a good donkey in Jesus of Nazareth in the nativity bit. That's the one sort of wintry bit that feels wintry. Is there's a shot of donkey.
Was that the bit with the donkey? The donkey has an erection.
Yeah, but the nativity scene that I think is really good of the Jesus-y ones is the one in The Greatest Story Ever Told, which it just looks beautiful.
Isn't that the one with the painted backdrop? It doesn't look.
It looks less like a stable and more like a sort of huge cavern of some kind.
Okay.
But it manages to do a few wee Christmassy things, like it has shots of people looking in the window, and the window's all warm and glowing on them, even though it's they're looking into it. And it's also kind of creepy because you've got your man saying, telling Herod about, that a child has been born, they must die, this kind of stuff. And for a while it looks like his eyes are sewn together. They're not. It's just whatever way his neck is. So that's good. But my favorite nativity scene is in a film called Jesus, Their Film, which I only got to see a couple of years ago, but I had been looking for since I first read about it in a tiny bit in a magazine somewhere when I was at school. It's a brilliant, really funny, made for nothing film. Jörg Buttgereit has a sequence in it, but it was put together by a guy, Michael Brintrup.
Well, the Jörg Buttgereit one is probably where I'm thinking of the donkey with the erection.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of such things in Jesus, Their Film. So it's all these different segments, mostly handled by different people, but with Michael Brintrup overseeing them all. And it's extremely funny. But the bit with Mary starts with her on a bed, and she's reading the Bible. She's reading a bit about Mary, and then it pulls back, and we see that also in the room with her is a fucking huge knob, like kind of like a Fassbender's Corel, it's like this big massive thing. And she's sitting there, and it's there, and then Brintrup himself appears on the bed as an angel with a big cardboard sign that says like Hail Mary or something, and he's shaking it, and he's like, you will bear a son or you will have you will give birth to a son, and you will desire him. Oh, I mean, you will bear him.
You will desire. Nice.
There's that, and then it has a shot of him as Jesus in the womb, fully grown, with these like 1980s kind of new wave haircut. It's astonishing. It sounds a bit try-hard and edgelordy, but it doesn't come across like that. It just comes across really funny.
Is it Christmassy?
Well, there's a scene where they do when they do the miracle, as they call it, the miracle of the loaves. It's a shot of Brintrup in a modern day street at a market stall with a toaster, and he's sitting making toast and kind of giving it to people. And as he's doing so, Do They Know It's Christmas by Band-Aid is playing in the soundtrack.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
which is
wow.
probably why
I
it's so hard to get, because I'd imagine they struggled with the rights for that.
Actually, that's something that might be worth mentioning also with our US versus UK. UK is creepy, US is saccharine. The music we listen to... Now, granted, in the UK we have all and more of the kind of terrible Christmas songs, right?
Yeah.
Like Band-Aid, mercifully, is not known out here.
Oh, really?
You don't hear Band-Aid. No.
You had We Are the World, I suppose.
Yeah, but not at Christmas time, I don't think. So we have terrible Christmas songs in the UK. We have the X Factor single every year as well. But we also have there's more of an emphasis on the Christmas hymns, like the King's College choir concert is heard every year. Now that's all creepy to me. That all fits into the kind of creepy aesthetic, which you don't really have here with Mariah Carey or whatever.
That's true. And M.R. James was part of that college as well. So so that's he
was the one telling them, go, can you make it a bit scarier, please? Let's throw in some lyrics about Revelations. Why not?
I like the cattle. Could we say them backwards?
Yeah, but that is all quite eerie. Again, it's antiquity, I suppose.
It is.
Makes it feel a bit more.
America doesn't have that same tradition. I mean, you're going back. You're talking about expansion and exploration and genocide, and all this sort of stuff. You don't have the same history of kind of nobody's finding dusty old manuscripts from 600 years before or whatever. So I suppose there is that.
Unless you live in the Amityville house, in which case the Indians have set up shop in the basement. But yeah. So that might be part of it. The kind of Christmas sound, the sound of.
Yeah,
I always found the Christmas hymns quite scary.
Well, they are. They're eerie.
They are.
And actually, it doesn't. Lost Hearts has choir children of the damned.
Yes. Are they choir children? Maybe. I'm not sure. One of them has big long fingers.
Yes. Which is no replacement for a heart, I don't think.
I may have no heart, but my fingers are awfully long.
But yeah, the Christmas music. I mean, although now there seems to have been a sort of turn against it, but it used to be the case that people would say, there's almost a diehard debate about Fairy Tale in New York, and whether it's a Christmas song or it's just a song that happens to be about Christmas. But I was thinking about it. Even it has that kind of Christmas carol, Christmas past, present, future thing going on.
It does. Doesn't Shane MacGowan himself says it's not a Christmas song?
Yes, but
he's also not to be trusted about anything.
No, he says a lot.
It is a Christmas song to me, but that's also one that hasn't made it out here really so much.
Really?
You don't hear it, no. Whereas in England, you can't avoid it.
Yeah, it's
from what I remember. Yeah,
it's everywhere. And of course, there's the issue surrounding the language that it uses.
You can't even say.
Yeah. And again, the other day, even just this is anecdotal, but it's also true that on the radio I was hearing people saying things like that, and not 10 minutes before, Fairy Tale in New York had been on, and it wasn't censored.
In all its glory. Yeah.
Can't even say that in case it offends a queer.
Yeah.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, actually, I don't think that should be. I think by now, I mean, the album's there. Everyone knows the song inside out. So really, it won't make my Christmas any different at all, hearing the word faggot. But it might make someone else's Christmas really fucking shit. So
maybe, yeah. But also then by having a song that is going to be played endlessly, and then having some really awkward censorship that might then make people. It just draws more attention than anything else.
Well, it does, and I suppose there's. Well, yeah, that's true. It's that Louis C.K. thing about you're making me say it in my head.
Yeah.
And also,
Louis C.K. would say you were making him do a lot of things.
Yes. Less said about head than Louis C.K. the better. But Ronan Keating did of Boyzone fame did a version of it where the lyrics went, "You're cheap and you're haggard. You scumbag, you maggot, you're cheap and you're haggard." And actually, the demo version with Cotter Reardon doing the vocals that Kirsty MacColl would come to do doesn't have that word in, but it has other words. So it has a line about where she sings, "I ain't even been fucked since last Christmas Day."
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. from
but
the
it doesn't
bell,
have
yeah.
the bit about you scumbag, you maggot, you cheap. It might have scumbag and maggot, but it doesn't have the rhyme faggot. I can't remember what it does have, but it doesn't have that.
Right.
So it's one or the other. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, Grimmer comforts Christmas.
Well, just before we leave altogether, what I was thinking was the nativity, as I said, doesn't feel Christmassy necessarily to me. It feels
It's
a bit,
not. It's rubbish.
It's not even Christmas.
But the bit that does feel a bit Christmassy is the bit in John 20. I think when Jesus comes and says, "Here I am," and they're all like, "Oh, so you are," but Thomas says, "No, you're not." He's like, "I am." No.
It's a bit Miracle on 34th Street.
Yeah, that feels Christmassy. This kind of inn, I imagine, and it's all they're all huddled together, and the door bangs open, and it's the snow outside, and here comes himself.
Where you hear the jingle of bells, and and he comes.
And actually, Ravenous had because it is a lot of fun with Jesus stuff. It's slightly subversive, they would say, and it has the reversal of that. So because Guy Pearce believes that Robert Carlyle's character is the Wendigo, and then he suddenly shows up in a what's the word, situation. He shows up where he's not expected, and he's like, "That's him." And people say, "Who?" And he's like, "The scary man. That's him." And so to prove that he's not, he has to take bits off and show that there are no wounds.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah,
I never drew the comparison between that and Jesus, but yeah, I suppose.
Well, there's so much Jesus chat before that it's. I mean, there's a lot of talk about cannibalism and the sacrament, and there's jokes about that, and there's Jesus on a tea towel thing, and so I mean, it's not just that it kind of. I mean, there's too much other Jesus stuff going on for that not to be also part of it. But it doesn't feel very wintry to me.
Well, see, I mean, this proves them all right, though. It's like we try to talk about Christmas horror, we're talking about slashers and people dressed up like Santa and pickles and God knows what, but at the end of the day, we end the conversation by talking about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Take that, Muslims. You can't get rid of it.
Should we?
You can't even call them the Gospels anymore. You have to call them sentences of winter, seasonal sayings of somebody.
Well, I think horror or not, I think England does Christmas. Well, I prefer English Christmas to American Christmas. There are some things that haven't come out here that I'm amazed they haven't. Just for America likes consumerism, but there are some things like Christmas crackers aren't out here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you would think that would be great.
Yeah,
absolute
tat that costs nothing to make.
Exactly. Yeah, and explosions. You pull it open and it sounds like a gun. But no, that hasn't come out here. Mince pies haven't come out here. Figgy pudding, forget about it. Yeah, we don't do anything that good. They have a ham for Christmas because they're already full of turkey from Thanksgiving.
Well, that's the thing. They have Thanksgiving, don't they?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking,
sort of kills the thunder of Christmas a little bit because it happens right before.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I was thinking of was that here, Christmas is the one holiday that you absolutely cannot go without noticing.
Yeah.
So you could easily pass Easter by, Halloween, blah blah blah, but Christmas you can't. The TV's different, the streets look different, everything's like it completely takes over everything. And I was thinking there's no other holiday like it, but maybe in America there is, because as far as I know, Thanksgiving does similar things.
Well, what happens quite often, I think, is that people don't spend Christmas with their families because they've already done that for Thanksgiving. And you got to remember, like, people live on other sides of the country quite often. So if you're going to fly back for Thanksgiving at the end of November, you're not going to make the same journey again a month later. So, yeah, quite often you get people who just have Christmases either by themselves or with friends. Which, there's nothing wrong with that. But I like the kind of definitiveness of Christmas in England, because first of all, there hasn't been another holiday for a while. You know, Halloween maybe, or Guy Fawkes Night, I suppose. But yeah, it feels like the world kind of stops a little bit at Christmas. It doesn't stop here. Everything's still open. Yeah, it doesn't feel quite as special, and it's not spooky at all.
Yeah. Well, maybe I suppose whenever the maybe it was because in the UK I suppose it was the Catholic Church, or what? Not in the UK, but what you had was the Catholic Church trying to make paganism into something else. But to the best of my knowledge, the most of the people who then left for America were not taking Roman Catholicism with them.
No.
So maybe there was some, I don't know, maybe Christmas felt, I mean, I don't know, I don't know if there's any basis for that at all, but it would make sense if another holiday came in to do for them what Christmas did for the Catholics relative to the pagans, if that makes sense.
It's kind of interesting though. There obviously America is quite a lot more Christian than England, pound for pound, but they can't do nativity plays in school. You can't fucking do anything now, can you? Christmas. But they can't because that's not allowed. You're not allowed to have religious discussion in schools. So they don't do nativity plays. Quite a lot of children, including my stepson, who bizarrely identifies as a Christian, even though we don't do any of that. He didn't know what Christmas was. Like, he knew that you got presents. He knew about Santa, that Santa was there and got presents, but he did not know that it was about the birth of Jesus, even. And that's kind of baffling to me, because... But then, on the other hand, my wife's father is a pastor, like a very... is he he's somewhere in between a Baptist and something else. But he... when they were growing up, they would celebrate Christmas, but not really. Like, they were very against the commercialization of it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a bit of that going on, too, with at least the religious angle here. Whereas in England, I think we're all comfortable enough with what it is and what it's roughly about that, for instance, people who had no religious inclination whatsoever, like myself, would really like the tradition of going to the church to hear, for the mass, for the carol concert, whatever, the hymn concerts, not hymn, the Finnish band, the Christmas hymn concert. Join me. But I really like that. And then out here, I couldn't find a carol concert. I couldn't find one. I really tried. The closest you have are like either big church services that are like, you know, the kind of happy clappy acoustic guitar singing jingle bells, or just very solemn, you know, religious services. But there's nothing in between. Whereas I think in England we do a bit of everything, and we're sort of comfortable with that, knowing what it's about, but also enjoying the fun of it. Yeah, but I think the pageantry. The pageantry, yeah, which I think is there's kind of a big divide here, so you don't really get the best of either, and certainly you don't get the spookiness, which I like.
No, because I think you need one for the other. I think to work properly.
Yeah. It feels like I kind of agree with the American Christians when they say that it has just become a commercial thing. Like, discovering that my stepson didn't even know that it was meant to be about Jesus being born, didn't know that story at all. Like, didn't know anything about the three wise men, the no room left at the inn, the stable, the donkey, none of that. Didn't know it. And it's just not taught to us. So I'm like, yeah, fair enough. I understand where they're coming from. But I'm also not here being like, oh, you can't even do Christmas now.
Yeah, I suppose as well. There's a like, I mean, all the films we were talking about that are all kind of you know, you've got it wrong. You've got the season wrong. You know, the reason for the season and all that business. Even if they're not, although I wouldn't say Krampus is trying to tell you forgot about Jesus, but it's saying you forgot something important.
But they don't mention Jesus in Miracle on 34th Street either. It's you've forgotten about Santa.
Yeah. So you would think there must be a point like every year you have these people very vocal, well, no, we've forgotten, or this isn't Christmas, this is something else, you're not doing Christmas, you're doing this other thing. And there must be a point where if it has done the thing it's doing for long enough, maybe that's what it is.
That's what it is now. Yeah,
it's like
which I think is fair enough, and I think that's why everyone, well, most people, not everyone, celebrates Christmas, even if they're not religious. Is because it's just it's more of a cultural thing, and as with any cultural things, they shift along with whatever culture's doing.
And also we give, the people who say you can't say this or that, we give them space on discussions and talk shows to say about how we've forgotten that. But we don't do the same for the people who say we've forgotten about the winter solstice. You have just as much right as anyone else to be saying you've got it wrong.
Yeah, that's a funny idea, isn't it? The pagans complaining out there, going on about Jesus now. I can't even mention Gaia. Yeah. But I think, I do miss. I like that bit of pageantry and that kind of. I like retaining that just because it makes things spookier, and I feel like Christmas should be spooky, but it's not very spooky out here, which is a pity. Yeah. But anyway, that's that. So Merry Christmas, a little bit late. Should we talk a little bit about Aaron has done some good work, whereas I've been incredibly lazy over the last few weeks, or preoccupied with other stuff, trying to make Christmas spooky in my household. Put in I brought in the Christmas pickle, the thing about the story where Saint Nicholas rescued some children who'd been brined by a butcher. Brought that in. I've been dressing up in a sheet, trying to chase the kids around like Whistle and I'll Come to You. I've been trying. Making them watch
You've been
Krampus.
getting them postgraduate degrees in the early 20th century.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep it alive. Yeah. But anyway, while I've been doing all of that, you come up with some stuff for us to talk about in the next year.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So just do you want to give I've got it up here. You want to give a quick rundown of things that I've agreed to all of it, because why not? So we're gonna do something on Gaspar Noé.
Yes. So the idea was to have one. If there's enough for 2 episodes, and there is, but I was thinking it would be a thing to maybe think about Irreversible in the time that it came out, and other things that were going on with sort of extreme art house kind of films at that time, and the new French extremity and all that stuff. But also with Noé, because after Enter the Void, I think we both agree there is a huge, and actually was Districted before Enter the Void?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so that was awful.
Yes.
And Enter the Void was not awful, and then everything else was, until recently.
And then Vortex wasn't.
Yeah, he surprised us by showing that actually he does know how to do something good still. And it did, so that would be a thing. And Districted itself is, although I haven't seen it in many years, but I do remember the strange sensation, because Gaspar Noé is someone who I thought was a very, very good filmmaker, and yet he had made this absolute tripe.
Yeah.
Whereas Laurie Clark is someone whose films I detest. I think he's a leery, creepy old bastard. And yet his installment in the Districted film was brilliant.
It was quite good.
So there was that.
Yeah, so you suggested maybe we'll do a second episode, make it a 2-parter about Gaspar Noé and all of that, and then the second part to be, well, let's reappraise the shit films we're talking about of his repertoire are that Districted segment, Love, and Climax.
Yes.
And the idea of the second part is to say, well, are they still shit now that we've seen Vortex and both agreed it's quite good? Maybe there's something more in these 2 films. Yeah. I have a strong suspicion that won't warrant an entire episode, because I think for me the answer is probably just going to be, yeah, no, they're still shit.
Yes, and
I cannot imagine going back to Love and thinking, oh, actually, it's quite good.
Well, I was thinking that. I was like, 40 minutes in, I'm really, unless something miraculous has happened, I'm gonna be not too happy that there's still quite a lot of it left.
Exactly. But anyway, that's one example. Then you want to do Nightmare on Elm Street 2 /
Yeah.
Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. The documentary.
That's a really interesting case. I mean, when I was growing up, the second Nightmare on Elm Street was always talked about. Awful, terrible stuff. And one of the reasons that would often be given is, remember how people used to describe things as weirdly homoerotic? Like it's weirdly homoerotic. Yeah. Well, this was a textbook example of that. But the lead fella in Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was gay, but closeted, because at that time you really had to be. I mean, studios were we're demanding blood tests when people come on set and things like this. So, and then he made this film, and he said that he went to see it, and he was like, "Oh my God, Jesus Christ, this is the gayest thing I've ever seen," and I'm right there in the middle of it, and so there was this whole thing where the film started to, first of all, develop a cult following. With queer audiences especially, because it is so very much that. But also the writer of the film insisted that anything of that sort was brought to it by the lead actor, Mark, I forget his surname. Even though it's a film about a very clearly effeminate, let's say, young man who's got a girlfriend, but he's also got this man inside of him, which is Freddie, who he keeps having this very intimate back and forth discussion with. There's a scene where he walks out through the streets to a leather bar where he sees his gym teacher, and then Freddie takes the gym teacher into the toilets and strips him and starts whipping him with leather. Wow. I mean, the idea that was there by accident, or it just didn't make sense. But then later the writer started to say, well, okay, well, it was, but it was homophobic. That was the point. It was supposed to scare you off it. So there's a whole, but the trajectory of the lead, as outlined in that Scream Queen documentary, is it's something. When I heard about the documentary being funded, it was through Kickstarter initially. I thought, well, it's just going to be about how Nightmare on Elm Street 2, had this very just subtext, but it's that kind of subtext that's like really, really close to text, and then how it was rediscovered. So I thought that's what it would be about, but it isn't quite what it's about. It's an incredibly affecting thing, and it just opens up all sorts of interesting questions about audiences and appropriation, and how things that might have been intended to do this thing end up doing the exact opposite for, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
It makes for a, I think there's enough. It's the two of them. I don't think you could do Nightmare on Elm Street 2 without mentioning the documentary, and obviously you couldn't do the documentary without mentioning Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Right. So I'll have to watch both of them. All right.
Yes.
All right. He's giving me a workload here. So after that, we've got Acute Misfortune / Hated, G.G. Allen and the Murder Junkies, the Todd Phillips, early Todd Phillips documentary. I don't know Acute Misfortune, but I'm very familiar with Hated. So what do you want to talk about there?
Well, Acute Misfortune is it's an Australian film about an artist whose name escapes me. But anyway, he was. It's based on a actual a fellow who was writing a book about this artist in real life. I can't remember his name. And the artist in question, a big part of what he does is to do with how I think he's maybe schizophrenic and that sort of thing. He's an alcoholic. He's a very difficult person. So there's this whole. So the film is basically about this young guy with him, I guess, to write this book about him, and it throws up a lot of stuff about these ideas about mental illness and creativity, and how we buy into those things, and the cliches, and and I guess the real life consequences of the so-called tortured artists on everybody around them, and how so. And I guess the G.G. Allen film is the same, because a big part of that appeal, maybe the whole appeal, is the extent to which he is extremely confrontational and unhinged, and it's that same sort of thing, just in two different spheres, I suppose. So one of them is to do with art, as in gallery art, and one of them is to do with punk rock and performance art. But I think that would be an interesting sort of a. Plus, I mean, they're really good films.
Well, Christmas is definitely over. There's nothing Christmassy about those, but yep, looking forward to that. Then Martyrs and Antichrist together.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, except for very broad strokes, I don't know if I would put them in the same podcast, but why don't you explain why? Except for them coming out around the same time, both being extreme-ish, artsy horror films.
Well, what links them in my mind is I see Martyrs as very much a film about the desire to see women suffer, and that there's something different about that if they do it right. I mean, that's, without wanting to spoil too much, that's what happens in Martyrs. There's the sort of the matriarch baddie has this kind of book of women at the point of dying, I suppose.
I see what you get.
And there's something going on with them that they're trying to recreate in other women.
And then in Antichrist, the protagonist is obsessed with genocide. And stuff,
yes, and it's made by a man who spent his career shoving a camera as far into the face of suffering women as he could,
right.
And then started kind of trolling us with the idea. So that in some ways, Antichrist is impossible. In some ways, you could be angry about it the way you might be angry about breaking the waves if you are angry about it. But in another way, you can't, because the whole time he's shoving his fingers at you, and he's like, oh, God. And it's full of these kind of trolling. So to my mind, Martyrs is about something that Antichrist is an expression of. So it is the thing that Martyrs is asking questions about. It's interesting, though, also because you see, I wrote about Martyrs quite a lot and presented on it, and I still cannot pronounce the director's name.
Pascal Lochier? Yeah, something like that.
So he went on to make something like Incident in a Ghostland, which
he maimed
repulsive.
someone. Yeah, and there's something where he badly injured or disfigured an actress and
through a glass door or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So he's kind of cancelled now.
Well, it wasn't even so much that it was cancelled. It was doing the thing that Martyrs seemed to be asking questions about, to the extent that the only purpose it served was to make people who really liked Martyrs feel like idiots.
So Lars von Trier wins.
Yeah.
Come and See is the next one. I think that's a good one to do, but you also extrapolated to maybe kids in bad situations in general.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, it ticks all the boxes as a thing for Grimmer comforts to be grimly comforted by.
It's incredibly grim, not especially comforting.
No, but it came to my mind because I was watching a film from 2019 called County Lines, which is a British film about a 14-year-old fella who is pulled into what's known as county lines drug dealing, I suppose, where children are sort of picked to do a job, which is to take the stuff from this place, this city, whatever, to somewhere far away. And it follows one young guy doing that. But as it proceeds, it starts to look a lot like Come and See. And then I read a review afterwards, Mark Kermode's review for The Observer, and he said that the director actually cited Come and See as you can come and see that is very obvious. so I just put that film in my head, and I hadn't seen it in a while, and I thought, because that's another one that kind of developed it. For a long time, you didn't really hear anyone talking about it.
It popped up when Criterion got it or something?
Yeah. Suddenly it would appear on lists somewhere. Greatest film ever.
I had never heard of it until, probably the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, same here.
In that one, it might also be worth talking about In a Glass Cage, if you ever saw that.
I have, but I didn't want to write it in, in an email.
Really? Oh, okay.
Well, it's still is banned over here still for.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't. It never got a certificate. I know at the time.
Oh,
well, maybe it
I
has
didn't
since.
know that. I don't think you're banned from saying the words "in a glass cage," though.
Yeah, but you know.
Well, yeah. Anyway, I mean that sort of fits in with a discussion about Come and See, I suppose.
It doesn't actually. Mark E.G. has talked about that film actually.
In a Glass Cage.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's put it as like one of his
dirty old bollocks.
Dirty her.
Yeah. And then Mondo Cane and all that it gave wave to. So the Mondo documentary. So you're not going to make me watch those, are you?
Well, the thing about
I've seen one or two of them.
If there was anything grisly, well, there is grisly, but if there was anything of the sort of stuff we talked about in the Terrifier, in the introduction episode, then I wouldn't have recommended it at all, or suggested it. But I mean, I'm going to watch it again if we do that, I'm going to watch it first to be absolutely sure. But to the best of my, I think Mondo Cane #2 is the first one to have. They staged, the famous Burning Monk protest. They staged that and included it in Mondo Cane #2. And it looks, I mean, if you didn't know any different, you would assume it was actually there. But it wasn't. But the first one doesn't have that sort of stuff. It has a sequence in what the voiceover tells us is that it's a house for the dying in an East Asian country. I can't remember where it is, but there are people who are elderly or ill who we see. But the thing about it is you can't really trust very much of what the voiceover tells you about anything, because like the lies and the fabrications are sometimes like unbelievably. You can't always trust. You can't always, as far as documentaries go, it does a lot of stuff that you would assume a documentary would not do. So if you see a shot of a tree and there's all fish up in the tree, when the documentary is telling you in voiceover that this is because the sea is so polluted that the fish have actually come out onto the land and climbed trees to get away from it, you would think, I don't know if I buy that or not.
It's a bit like the panorama spaghetti tree.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Except it's but there is a lot of animal, because that's one of the things. So you couldn't. So they weren't able to show human stuff, but they could show a lot of animal footage. So you get lots
of animal death and wonderful.
Yeah, there's shots of like geese or ducks being force fed, geese being force fed, and sort of bull fights and running of the bulls and all this sort of stuff. So there's some stuff in that line.
Okay. Well, it's such a shame that luckily it'll be next year, because this year I spent some time with Mary and Dora crushing newts or stamping on snails and slum. Yeah, I mean, so I'm all tapped out on needless animal cruelty for this year. Yeah, it may as well have. Yeah, but hopefully by 2023 I'll be refreshed and be more than raring to go to see a badger being bothered or whatever. Yeah. All right. Well, that's some of the stuff you got to look forward to. We also have a bunch of other stuff that we talked about that we haven't got around to yet. Yeah,
we've.
I can't remember what any of them were. There was some where I'm like, oh no, we'll save that. We'll save that for when we fit the big time. Then we'll blow them away.
Was one of them.
Lords of Chaos, we should probably do that sooner rather than later. That feels relatively Christmassy. It's wintry anyway.
Yes, it's the time of year whenever I like to go out walking with Emperor.
Yes. Yeah, actually, that's a good January one, I think. That's a good New Year's one. Lords of Chaos. Black Metal.
We don't want it to be... We don't want to be talking about it welcome in the spring, I don't think.
No, and actually, nor do we want to be talking about it during the time of our Lord and Saviour's birth. because I think that would be disrespectful.
It,
So it's a good thing we didn't talk about it before around Christmas time.
Oh, yeah,
That's true.
They're talking about Satan at Christmas. You can say Satan all you like, but you can't say Jehovah. Anyway, you can't say Yahweh. You can just anyway. All right, I think that's about done. I have to get going anyway. So
yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add about Christmas and
I don't think
spookiness?
so. I think that's
If you want to make Christmas special for your family, go put on a sheet.
put on a sheet.
Put on a sheet, ring a bell, and walk around chasing them with a pickle.
And check your privilege.
Check your privilege as well. Yeah. Pipe bomb your local Starbucks for not having a red cup anymore, or whatever it is.
Well, again, actually, that's...
What was that? It was like they have a green cup anyway.
Yes, but that's actually a point where the Lords of Chaos lads do cross over quite neatly, because they were also very annoyed by
With
the influence
commercialization.
Yeah, McDonald's.
Yeah, they didn't like McDonald's. So, and again, I'm not sure if this story is true, but Varg boasted that he shot a McDonald's.
Yes, he shot it.
He shot it. So yeah, we drove up in my car, and I got my shotgun out, and I shot the McDonald's. Ooh.
And
Watch
they
out.
kicked the Gatorade.
Yes. Oh, Lordy. Yeah, he's great. He's great. Well, we have a whole episode on him. You got that to look forward to. Varg and his... Well, he's taken to wearing a Santa Claus hat lately. I don't know if you know about that. I'm not joking. Because...
I suppose he's trying to... Well, it goes back to rare exports and all that.
No, he likes Christmas because he likes whatever he thinks Saint Nicholas was based on, or the pagan, the Norse tradition that followed Saint Nicholas that created the Santa hat.
Mm-hmm.
He's fond of that.
He's fond of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know if he's gone around saying, "But you can't even mention Christmas now." He has everything needed, everything he needs to be like one of those tedious kind of Christian fundamentalists, except for the Christian part. I bet he's kind of regretting that in his teenage years he went so anti-Christian, because he would fit in very well.
Well, it's like Ricky Gervais. I mean, it's like there's one... Ricky Gervais keeps repeating that Richard Dawkins thing about how you're as much of an atheist as he is. It's just that he believes in one less. But the other way of looking at that is Ricky Gervais is as much a fundamentalist Christian as they are. It's just they believe in one more.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't... It's a shame we can't... Do you think it would be a bit of a stretch to get Derek in on an episode?
No, I think that's... I don't think we need to stretch anything. I think.
It fits in quite nicely. Yeah, okay, well, maybe we'll do a Derek special. Derek the Special.
Derek the Special.
We could have talked about that. They did a Christmas special, although it had nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. It was just released at Christmas time.
Because
It was released on December 23rd, but I don't think Christmas is in it.
Or is it?
I thought from the trailers, it seemed as though there was going to be a baby born on Christmas Day, and it was going to be baby Derek. Like it was going to be, because they do
There's
give
more Christmas
birth
than
to...
there is in... There's more Christmas in Derek than there is in Starbucks.
Well, I don't know. I seem to remember there being a bit where a priest comes to the care home, and Derek, the simple wisdom of Derek, convinces this priest that there is no God. And so the priest leaves. Merry Christmas. I don't know.
That reminds me, actually. I don't know why it reminds me. Maybe because Ricky Gervais is so disingenuous. But I remember when I was wee, my friend telling me that on Christmas Eve, if you've never told a lie, ever, like Derek, if you've never told a lie, you can hear the animals talking about Jesus being born. but only if you've never told a lie. So I don't know that anyone has ever been able to hear this.
Is that a thing? Is that...
Well, I'd never heard anyone else saying it, but that's what he told me.
Strange, some of these things that pop up, and you're like, wait, is that something that anyone actually believes? Anyway. All right,
Also,
I better get going, unfortunately, but...
well, it's worth throwing in at the very end that we talked about M.R. James and we talked about Jesus, but one of the things that M.R. James was first known for was translating some of the apocryphal Gospels. So,
Oh, is that right?
if you look up, say, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, you'll probably find his King James translation before you find any other.
Oh, I didn't know.
And the
that.
last thing is a just sort of recommendation of a thing. You know, LibriVox, where the free audiobooks. There's I think Peter Yeardsley is the guy's name because I heard it so often. Ghost Stories of an Antiquary, read by Peter Yeardsley. That's brilliant. Like loads of books on there are terrible. But that reading of the M.R. James stuff by that guy Peter Yeardsley or Beardsley or something like that, that's worth listening to at this time of year.
Peter Weirdsley, because you're going to get some weird stories in this Ghost collection for Christmas. All right. Well, that has to be it. Merry Christmas to all of you, belated, and a Happy New Year. And you can look forward to more of us.
If you're out slaughtering innocents, wrap up warm.
If you're out slaughtering innocents, be sure to check Egypt. You missed him. He
And
ran
before
away.
you go following too many stars, make sure they are stars, first of all.
Not satellites or airplanes.
Christmas drones.
He can't even have a real star anymore.
All right.